where things have gotten really ugly now, right? We're 2 weeks in, and this is when we're going to see. This is the ugly season. This is the ugly season when, no matter what side, although it seems like the Republicans are the ugliest, right? I mean, they're throwing the xenophobic stuff. They're showing. I mean, there was a thing on a piece in the New York Times today talking about the ads, calling if you're with Pelosi, you're a radical, you're a spender, you're a tax and spend Democrat. Meanwhile, they don't mention the fact that the Republicans lied about the election deniers. Which is worse, election deniability or election deniers, or someone who's actually taxing and spending for the good of the people in terms of real programs for the people? I mean, just to label someone a tax and spend Democrat, oh, he's with Pelosi. There's some black guy running in California. I just saw it on the cable, so I'm not sure what district he represents, but he's clearly a Democrat. And those attack ads, oh, I think this is Sacramento, an African American running against Kevin Kiley, I believe. And Kevin Kiley supports that, the attack, trying to label someone, oh, he's with Pelosi. Like that's a bad thing. Well, to some people it is. But is it? Not really. But these kind of attack ads, bringing in race and fear and xenophobia, and my goodness, this is what's going to decide what happens in the midterms. This is what's going to decide really the immediate future of our country as of, say, in 2 weeks, less than 2 weeks. Look, if you have not registered to vote, in California, I put out the message, there was still time up till midnight last night. However, and you can tell the states that really want you to vote because their laws are a little looser. In California, you can still register. You can be a conditional or a provisional voter, meaning you'll get your ballot, they'll put it in a separate pool, and it will be counted. It will ultimately be counted. But you can come to the party if you are a late registrant. You can still do it. Call your Secretary of State. Go online, the Secretary of State's office in California, and find out how you can be a provisional voter. If you are in another state, see what kind of rules there are for late registrants. The states that I hate are the ones that say cut you out and say, that's it, you're not in. California, like I said, has the provisional ballot that you can get. But all of this is important now because if you're not in the swing of things, if you're not in election mode, get in election mode because there's still a fighting chance. I mean, really, there's still a fighting chance. They're predicting a big turnout. We don't really know. It's not going to be the size of a general election, but it will be higher than most midterms. Thing is, you're still talking about a minority of people of all eligible voters. I mean, if you're eligible by age, by, on every other basis to vote, they've done studies. It says like 10% usually show up, usually turn out. That's a minority. That's the tyranny of the minority. But if you're a person of color, if you're an Asian American, an African American, a Latino American, you got to join that minority, the minority that votes, because they have the power. And it's critical now. Like I said, it is critical now. Wherever you are, in California, wherever you are throughout the country, you got to get out there. You got to vote or register to vote. And then if you already have your ballot, now I know most Asian Americans have their ballots. Asian Americans love voting by mail. And if you're a permanent vote by mail voter, cast it. Just cast it. Make sure, Give it time, give your ballot time to get where it needs to be. Your vote is important. Your vote is important now. I'm telling you. And I was just scanning the news. The news is pretty, I don't want to say dismal, but all right. So there was that story about the ads where Republicans inject race into campaigns with imagery showing black people, showing, minorities, showing, Asians, in some cases showing Hispanics. The whole idea, oh, they're radicals. Oh, they're the far left way. Everyone is scared of this idea that the far left wing wants to take over the world. It's crazy. Meanwhile, then, the people who are the most scared are Republicans who are on Medicare. They don't realize, is that a form of socialism, the kind of good socialism? Yeah. So you got to go out there and vote. All right. So just looking at the news, it's pretty bad. Another headline: Democrats on defense in blue states brace for a red wave in the House. This is how things have changed in just a few weeks. A few weeks ago, Democrats were all, things are turning around. And now the economy has turned and people are, I don't want to say they're panicking, but Democrats are really crossing their fingers now. I say, forget about the finger crossing. It's get out the vote time. It's let people know that there's a way that we can overcome whatever you're sensing, whatever you're fearing through the ads, and that if we all just go to the polls, that's fair. We all just have to go to the polls. We all have to register. We all have to vote. That is the hope. That will get us through this. And as I said, there is this red wave that people are perceiving, and we're going to see. We're going to see if it happens. There's still time, though. There's still time to register. If you haven't registered, there's still time to contact your Secretary of State and become a provisional voter. If you're late, you can still do it. All right, if you've seen me tweeting all morning, I want to honor Larry Itliong today. I got my Barong Tagalog up. It's still Filipino American History Month, not Heritage Month. History Month. Heritage, that's culture, that's the gong. History is the factual stuff that we learn about us, the stories about us, about Filipino American stories. And it's interesting. A friend of mine sent me something I wrote like 27 years ago. And of course, you want to talk about Filipino American History Month, and you go with the lead is 1587. 1587 that's the first Filipinos. And it's funny how over time, people are gravitating to that idea of 1587. I just noticed these trends in Filipino American History Month. Before that, it was, there were these New Orleans and Louisiana and the Manila galleon trade, right? There were those stories, and St. Malo, right? That whole, the idea that the galleon trade and the Filipinos on the boats, that they were among the first Filipinos in the 16th century or 17th, early 1600s. And then came the ship logs of Pedro de Unamuno, and it shows the Luzones Indios, Filipinos, on the ship on the central coast of California. They were the first Filipinos. The documentation 1587. So a lot of people now are saying, they're pointing to that, saying 1587. Just like other numbers, other magical numbers in history. I say they're magical because they drill it into you in school, right? 1492. That's when Columbia, 1580. If you're Filipino, it's 1587. The first Filipinos in the New World, their encounter with the New World, what is now the continental U.S., what was North America. Documented, 1587, October 18th. All right, so in that piece that I wrote 27 years ago, I mentioned it then, right? 27 years ago, where was Filipino-American history? Still in its nascent stages. I mean, the Filipino-American National Historical Society was going strong at that time. But, you think now where we are. I mean, it's 40 years now, right? And so I went to this White House webinar they did on Filipino-American history. Every speaker, Filipino, non-Filipino, every ceremonial speaker, it's like their speechwriters got to the same fact book. 1587. 1587. If you're Filipino-American, 1587 is the important date. That's the important date. 1587, October 18th. The first Filipinos arrived in the Americas. And that begins Filipino-American history. Really. I like to start it generally around the Filipino-American War because I look at Filipinos in America. But truly, you got to start it 1587. So that year, that should be in the back of your mind. Now, another key point is today, October 25th. Because aside from October 18th, 1587, we remember Larry Itliong. Born today, October 25th. Larry Itliong, October 25th, 1913, San Nicolas, Philippines. Died 1977, Delano, California in the Central Valley. Larry Itliong. It reminds me of my dad. He's a little younger than my dad. But same vintage, same era. They came around the same time, 1929. And my father stayed in San Francisco to work at the restaurants. Larry went on to the fields. Became a labor organizer. When he saw that Filipinos in the fields were making less than 10 cents an hour. So today is the day we honor Modesto. His name was Modesto. Modesto Larry Dulay Itliong, a.k.a. Seven Fingers, because he didn't just work in the fields. He also worked up and down the coast, right? Migrant work, went all the way up, was an Alascaro, worked in the canneries, lost some fingers. That's how he got to be known as Seven Finger Larry. I'm telling you, Larry, over the last, I would say easily, over the last 10 years or so, he has been a force in terms of an historical figure to kind of galvanize a sense of Filipino-American history, to say, hey, look, here's an omission. Here's an omission in our history. I mean, you celebrate Cesar Chavez for the grape strike, for merging the labor movement and the civil rights movement. You got to give Larry his due. I mean, I think I really got that sense of things going at about 2005. Okay, that'd be like 17 years. The last 17 years, there was this movement to remember Larry. I mean, there were other Filipinos. I mean, Philip Veracruz hung in there, stayed with the Union, worked with Chavez. But it was Larry who was the spark. It was Larry who lit the match and started the whole thing with that grape strike. It wasn't Cesar Chavez. When the Filipinos went on strike in Delano, they were the Agricultural Workers Organizing Committee, AFL-CIO. They went on strike. Where was Cesar Chavez? Cesar Chavez had a little organization of Mexicans newly arrived. It was like a community group. It was not a union. They were not organized. They were not ready to strike. The Filipinos were first. They went on strike. And because they were on strike, Chavez saw their impact. But Itliong also knew he needed the Mexican workers. And that's where the merger, the roots of the merger took place. Cesar Chavez, Dolores Huerta joined the strike. About a week later, that's the United Farm Workers. That's the story. Itliong stayed around for a couple of years, then left. Different stories about why he left. But from the people I've talked to, and I went down to Delano and talked to both sides. They were there for the anniversary celebration a couple of years back. And I remember people saying, well, Larry didn't see eye to eye necessarily with Chavez. They had different approaches. Larry Itliong was a rough, gruff, tough guy, man of the people, and Chavez was almost like had this MLK kind of thing. He was almost a spiritual movement. And I think Itliong split off. And then he went off, he left. According to some documents, according to Larry himself, in tapes, he said, they were trying to get me to go back, he said on one tape. They wanted me to work with Chavez. They wanted me to make sure that the union was going in the right direction. He wouldn't do it. So anyway, that's what happened. And Larry Itliong, still worth more than a mention, because when he first stepped foot, remember, the grape strike was in 65. Larry Itliong was striking as early as 1930 in all the little fields and all the little shops, all the little farms that he worked with Filipino workers. That was the main, the background of most of the workers back then in the 30s and the 40s and the 50s. They were making a dime an hour. Filipinos. The first strike Larry Itliong organized was in 1930. And then slowly he developed as a union organizer. By the time he was at Delano with the Agricultural Workers Organizing Committee, he was a veteran unionist. And all the Filipinos who were part of AWOC were in their 50s and 60s. They were not young guys. And it was that sense, right, that Itliong and the Union needed that young blood. The incoming folks from Mexico coming to the valley to work. And Cesar Chavez had control of them. The unions merge. That's the United Farm Workers story. That's how it happened. Now, you say, well, Chavez was there for the long haul, so maybe that's why he got most of the credit. Yeah, but there was a sense of some kind of slight, because if Larry Itliong had not gone out on strike first, in September 1965, the grape strike, if he had not led the way, would Chavez even have thought to strike? They weren't organized in that way. So that's why Itliong deserves more than just a little credit for starting the great Delano grape strike. That's why we honor his birthday, Itliong's birthday today, October 25th. And it's ironic that, we see all these different styles of leadership today being featured. We have Itliong's birthday, Filipino American History Month. We have Rishi Sunak. What a great Diwali gift to our South Asian brothers and sisters in the UK, right? Totally different people, totally different kind of leaders. Itliong, the rough and tumble guy. What is Rishi Sunak? Rishi Sunak, he's the made colonial immigrant, right? He is the great hope and dream of imperialism, that they can have someone in brown face act totally like the colonizer. I mean, that's Rishi Sunak, which is, I guess it's pretty blunt, but that's what it is. And why? Here's a question: why wasn't he first choice? To succeed Boris Johnson. Well, there was Liz Truss, a white female conservative. Although Rishi Sunak had, he was exchequer. He was, high up in government. He had the experience, but I was reading through some articles, a lot of backlash. Some people thought Sunak was too elitist for going to the best schools in Britain, for going to Stanford, for making his money at Goldman Sachs, and then marrying into Indian wealth. He was too successful for his own good. He is a calculatingly obnoxious made man. But son of Indian immigrants from Africa, born in Britain. I mean, can you see why maybe some white elitists or maybe some white middle class people in Britain may have resented him? He was seen as too elite. A brown man in perfect whiteface. Maybe you would call him Britain's version of the model minority? Maybe. I'm just putting it out there because he's now like it's the revenge of colonialism, right? But Sunak is more like beyond stiff upper lip. He's like the whole brown man as white mannequin. He's the curse of Lord Mountbatten and Churchill combined. Rishi Sunak is coming back to run the whole damn country. I mean, maybe that's why there was this reluctance to really embrace Sunak beyond, Prime Minister. Well, you can be the exchequer, but to be the Prime Minister, well, we have Liz Truss. We have Boris Johnson. I mean, Sunak was just sort of lying in the weeds, getting support. He got his 100 backers, and boom. Boris Johnson, who was thinking about a comeback, had to withdraw. So here's this smart guy, Sunak, who's become prime minister. And on the one hand, if you're a South Asian in Britain, you would say, hey, this is great. One of us. But it isn't exactly that. I mean, the knock on Sunak, if you want to know the knock on Sunak, it's that he's kind of out of touch. He doesn't know the poor South Asians in Britain. He is part of the upper crust. He's part of that brown privilege. If you can have brown privilege, you can have brown privilege. Rishi Sunak. I mean, he knows economics, so he knows how to do the work. He knows how to add to the dole during the pandemic, and when people are down, he also knows how to cut it. And he's shown that. He's conservative. He knows also that trickle down is kind of BS. So he's not as big a trickle down theory type as some Thatcherites, but he is conservative. And you look at some Indians in the lower classes who have been quoted in some of the news articles, they see him as privileged and kind of foreign from them. And lacking in the one word, lacking in compassion about regular folks, common people, the people. That's always the problem for the rich elite guys, no matter what color. In other words, Rishi Sunak is not exactly seen as for the little guy. He's more like the big guy who needs to be cut down to size. Who's going to do it? His new 100 lawmaker buddies who have thrusted him into the prime ministership? Or will it be the regular people who say, Rishi Sunak, he's not one of us? Well, we'll see. This is what makes countries, democracies, what they are. Frankly, I think Rishi Sunak could use a little bit of Larry Itliong. What was Larry Itliong? Man of the people. He had this attitude about negotiating with the owners of the farms and the ranches, a way of negotiating with people in power. This is what he said once. This is from a tape where he talked to some students at UC Santa Cruz. He was talking about what made him a leader. He says, I have the ability to make that white man know I am just as mean as anybody in this world. I could make him think, and I could make them recognize that I'm a mean son of a bitch in terms of my direction, fighting for the rights of Filipinos in this country. I feel we have the same rights as any of them, because in the Constitution it said that everybody has equal rights and justice. You've got to make that come about. they're not going to give it to you. That was the kind of fight. The fight for the common man. That's what Itliong had. That's the special Filipino-ness, that drive that made him leave the Philippines in 1929 to come here to America when he was just a kid. You realize that was like he was 16. High school education. Came here. He took on everybody. That was the fight. That was the passion that Itliong had. That's why we remember Manong Larry today. You know, he needed that fight in himself. I mean, he suffered from Lou Gehrig's disease. Took his life on February 8th, 1977, which is a day that also happens to be my father's birthday. I mean, it's just a coincidence, a psychic coincidence that makes sure we don't forget how connected we are to the past. So maybe you're not in California where it's Larry Itliong Day today. Wherever you are, Philippines, wherever you are in the country, just remember Manong Larry. March somewhere today. Hold up a picket sign. Be yourself or by yourself if need be. Make it a walk with purpose. Take a gamble like Larry. Larry was a gambler. Take a risk. Like Larry, always chomping a cigar. Chomp or blow a smoke ring. If you don't smoke, just chomp. Stand up. Shout for Filipinos in America. It's Larry's day. It's his birthday. October 25th, 1913. His birthday. So we honor Larry. And, you know, when I first started talking about him, we just wanted to make sure he was in the conversation. We just wanted to make sure that people didn't forget him. We wanted to make sure that people knew that, hey, that street you're driving down on in San Francisco, yeah, used to be called Army Street. Now it's called Cesar Chavez, whatever. Boulevard, Cesar Chavez. Used to be Army Street when I was growing up in San Francisco. Yeah, they named schools for Chavez. They named national monuments. They named public areas. They named post offices after Cesar Chavez. I think Larry Itliong gets a 10th of the recognition that Cesar Chavez does. And really, like I said, if it wasn't for Larry's spark, if it wasn't for Larry's passion, if it wasn't for all that Larry Itliong was, there'd be no United Farm Works. There'd be no Cesar Chavez. There'd be no merger of civil rights and civil rights, those two movements in the 60s. It was like all coming together. And Larry started it, and though he left, it would not have taken place were it not for that fight and passion that Larry Itliong had. So for that, we remember Larry, Manong Larry. And if you are of a subsequent generation, I mean, like I said, I look at Larry Itliong, I see my father. There are some younger Filipinos, some Filipinos who just came, post 65, Maybe they arrived in 1980. They don't know who Larry Itliong is. They don't relate to the fields. They don't relate to Stockton or Delano. They go down I-5 and skip the fields and go from San Francisco to LA in 4 or 5 hours and say, thank goodness, let's drive by this area where Filipinos really made history. And, maybe slowly they say, let's not take 5 from San Francisco to LA. Let's go down 99, the other parallel road, AKA the back alley to the valley, and let's see those little towns like Delano. Let's see those little towns where the Filipinos lived and they worked the farms. Let's see Filipino American history today as we drive through, passing the trucks and passing the fields on 99, Highway 99 in California. You can go from Sacramento to Stockton to Modesto to Turlock to Larry County, Fresno, Bakersfield, to the Grapevine. I'm sure you're driving a better car than the migrants did as it went from farm to farm. That's Filipino American history, California. And that was the pathway of Larry Itliong. Up and down California, the fields. And then when the fields weren't happening, up to Alaska. He was an Alascaro. Seven Finger Larry. Then he wound down in Delano. I'll tell you that anniversary in Delano a few years back, that was the 50th anniversary of the grape strike. That was one of the best moments that I'd experienced just covering Filipino American history. I mean, everyone was, Chavez, his family was there. They were all there to remember the grape strike. And if you go to my tweet, I tweet out a story I did for NBC News that talks about Larry Itliong. We're talking about, very few people know about Larry Itliong. Larry who? I'm telling you, he's important. And the coincidence of Sunak's rise, right? I mean, it's Sunak's day, I guess, worldwide. Because he's the prime minister. But October 25th, it's Larry's day. It's Larry Itliong Day in California. It's the day we remember him. Rishi Sunak can share it, but he'll have other days to make his mark and to show or develop a sense of compassion that a lot of people think Rishi Sunak lacks. We'll see. We'll see. But let's honor Larry. Manong Larry today. Larry Itliong. There was one line in his lecture to UC Santa Cruz students I liked. He could not be bought. Larry Itliong knew what was important. Money was not important to Larry Itliong. I mean, he could have all the money if he wanted. People were throwing money at him like the unionists saying, go help Chavez. Go help the farm workers. They knew that Larry was an organizer, that he had the magic. But Larry, that wasn't important to Larry. He used to say, just give me pusit and bagong and tomatoes. He was his own man. and he could not be bought. Maybe that's the thing about Larry Itliong. He had this sense about him. He knew who he was. He was a Filipino American. All right, so honoring Larry today. That's going to do it for our show. Back again tomorrow. I talked about Rishi Sunak. That's important. And we touched on some of the news, but really, let's think about Mon and Larry more. And as we leave, go to my columns at Inquirer.net, or go to my or just Google Emil Guillermo, Larry Itliong. You'll see all my columns I've done about Larry. I never met him, but I always felt I knew. And I am friendly with his son. I mean, we've talked, and Johnny, good guy. I just think we're still a long way from being fully restoring where Itliong belongs. And I think a lot of it is because as we get further away from our history, people are willing to say, oh, let's remember 1587. But they forget the guys in the fields, the first real Filipinos to settle. I mean, that's a thing about the 1587 Filipinos. They didn't hang around. I mean, the 1587 Filipinos, they came on Pedro Unamuno's boat, and you heard me talk about this on my shows. Go back and go to amok.com. You can hear me tell that story. They jumped ship and they went out, and they were gone in 3 days. Did they stay beyond what the logs say, these Luzones Indios? Did they mesh with the Chumash tribes that were in that area? There's no record of that. And so history notes that they were there, but it was almost like a drive-through. Here's the thing about the Filipinos here in Larry's time, 1929. They stayed. They left a record. They made history. That's why we can't forget them. The first, 1587, important. Who were the Filipinos making a difference? The Filipinos who were part of a community, making a community, and making history. Larry Itliong. It was Larry. So believe me, every year, Filipino American History Month, it comes toward the end of the month, the 25th, in a nice little way, in the second part of October, whereby the first part it's shared with Hispanic Heritage Month, the last part from the 15th to the 31st, the 18th, the first Filipinos, the 25th, Larry Itliong, and on Halloween, I think we got to remember Lorenzo Dow and the connection between Lorenzo Dow, a Filipino American, and the Dred Scott case. And go back to amok.com and go back to that show where I talk about the Dred Scott case, how it was decided. That case where the court said, black men, no, you aren't free. You're slaves. And it sparked off the abolitionists, sparked off what would become the Civil War, the basis of the Dred Scott decision, that terrible, heinous, racist decision, maybe the most racist decision ever by the Supreme Court, the Lorenzo Dow case, 1840, Filipino American, where it was decided that Filipinos, because of this thing that happened to Filipinos, and it applied to all people of color, African Americans, natives, and that should be a landmark case in Filipino American history. But that's on Halloween. We'll talk about that then. All right. One more time, the talk show implement. Tomorrow, I'll be back. Wednesday, always a fun day. We'll do some repeats on Thursday or Friday. And then maybe we'll do some remote things coming up. Anyway, remember, there's still time to vote. If you haven't registered, you can still, in California, if you haven't registered, you still can. You can be a provisional voter, which means you get a ballot. They take it, they put it in a bin, a protected bin, and they count it. Once all the other votes are counted, you will be counted. Don't miss out. Go online to the Secretary of State. There's still time, even though you missed the October 24th deadline, you can still register to vote. All right, regular listeners to this show know that I like to meditate. It's helped me calm down, and I think it could help you. I'm here to say I used to be Amok, Amok, and now I just am okay. And the one meditation I like to do is just the loving kindness meditation, because sometimes the things that bring you down, that make you feel bad, that make you run in need of meditation, is when you're not kind to yourself. You beat yourself up. I don't know, is it the self-flagellation of the Catholic Filipino? I don't know. But we can do something about it. We can do something about it by a little metta meditation. Metta, M-E-T-T-A. Loving kindness. Loving self-kindness. And it's just taking the time to show love to yourself, but first by showing it to others. Then it's like a little booster because it comes back in return. Threefold, twofold, fourfold, however many folds you want. And so, as I wish for me, I wish for you. May you be safe. May you be happy. May you be healthy. And may you live with ease. Emil Guillermo here. Replays on amok.com. Back again tomorrow, live, 2 p.m. Pacific, right here. Till then, mahal kita.